Whereas things are getting very heated in Washington, D.C., as a select group from Congress has been given access to the unredacted Epstein files, which reference our president far, far more than anyone could have imagined.
He said that I spent time on Jeffrey Epstein's island. I didn't. I mean, he's a lightweight, this guy. He's a terrible, I think he's terrible. I thought he did a terrible job at the Grammys.
Nobody thought this night would be any different. Just another familiar late-night opener. A handful of safe jokes, easy laughter filling the studio. Maybe a gentle jab at whatever story dominated the headlines. Nothing daring, nothing unexpected, just the comfortable routine everyone knew. But that illusion shattered completely. The second Jimmy Kimmel locked his eyes onto Donald Trump, something invisible in that room changed forever. Nobody had anticipated this shift. It stopped feeling like entertainment and started feeling like something dangerously real. A spark had ignited, not from the lights above the stage, but from the suffocating tension that finally, violently snapped.
A big deal, obviously, and a big story. A story that Donald Trump would prefer just goes away, but it won't just go away. It's salacious. It's the kind of story that makes headlines, and he knows that. So what he does is he bombards us with a dozen other crazy things to try to flood.
Part of it is not watchable, but he was a lousy host. I'd say not as bad as Jimmy Kimmel, but pretty close. And no, he made a statement about me and Jeffrey Epstein.
What started as an ordinary comedy segment slowly morphed into something far heavier, and you could almost sense the heat building with every punchline that hit its mark. This was never a gentle exchange or a measured political discussion. It resembled a perfectly calculated demolition. From the surface, everything appeared smooth and composed, but deep underneath the walls were silently crumbling, one layer at a time, until the very ground holding everything together began trembling under unbearable pressure.
You know, it's a term you hear a lot, but rarely when it is literally true. And most of all, it is so bananas that the guy who's in charge of releasing all these files and redacting all this evidence is Donald Trump's own personal defense attorney. You know, when Trump was convicted of 34 felony counts of fraud, Todd Blanche was his lawyer. Now Todd Blanche is the gatekeeper to the Epstein file.
Pause for just a moment. If this breakdown is hitting different and you want more content like this, go ahead and subscribe to Dark Insights so you never miss what drops next. Because trust me, we have barely scratched the surface. Now, let us dive back in. For years, Trump dismissed late-night hosts as nothing more than background noise. Slightly annoying perhaps, but never deserving genuine attention. He had sparred with comedians countless times before, shaking off their jokes like lint from an expensive suit. But this moment breathed differently. Kimmel never threw cheap surface-level punches and walked away. He dissected the image. He poked at the ego. He challenged the towering narrative surrounding Trump for years. That calculated shift changed absolutely everything. Now,
Trump responding to that, I'll tell you how. By attacking Canada again. He's at it again. This time, he's threatening to close down a new bridge they're almost finished with that connects Windsor to Detroit. He wrote, "As everyone knows, the country of Canada has treated the United States very unfairly for decades." I didn't know that, actually. They always seem pretty fair to me, but okay.
This time, Trump could not simply walk away unbothered. Late-night television thrives on exaggeration and spectacle. That much is understood. But what made this particular clash so magnetic was never just the comedy itself. It was what the comedy quietly exposed underneath. The deeper Kimmel pushed into the absurdity, the more Trump's frustration became impossible to conceal. And frustration never stays contained for long. Outrage spreads rapidly, multiplies dangerously, and in today's ruthless media landscape, it burns like pure gasoline.
Much we could take in. So to distract us, right now one of the things he's doing is suing everybody. Now, last night, I mentioned Trump is suing the IRS that he runs for $10 billion, and that he's planning to negotiate a settlement to that suit with himself, which is just, if any other president, it would be the biggest story of their whole 4 years in office. For Trump, it doesn't even crack the top 5 this month. But so the New York Times published a story yesterday, claimed Trump has dropped his demand that Harvard, the university, pony up $200 million.
It felt like standard late-night playfulness. Kimmel highlighted Trump's relentless online activity, his instinct for transforming small provocations into enormous confrontations, and his extraordinary talent for making every headline personally about himself. The The jokes landed with precision, but remained controlled. The audience laughed with familiar comfort. The rhythm felt recognizable, almost expected. Like everyone already knew the melody and willingly moved along with it.
Spanish-speaking world to culture. Bad Bunny got a bad review from our bad president, unfortunately. He wrote, the Super Bowl halftime show is absolutely terrible, one of the worst ever. It makes no sense, is an affront to the greatness of America, and doesn't represent our standards of success, creativity, or excellence. Nobody understands a word this guy is saying, and the dancing is disgusting, especially for young children that are watching from throughout the USA and around the world. This is a man who paid off a porn star.
Then, something changed beneath the surface. Rather than mocking the obvious theatrics, Kimmel began exposing the repetition, the obsession with crowd sizes, the hunger for absolute loyalty, the recycling of identical themes repackaged as fresh outrage. He painted it less as political commentary and more as an endlessly running performance. Almost like a reality show that permanently refuses to reach its finale. That is precisely where the atmosphere tightened, because comedy strikes deepest when it reveals something audiences silently recognize but never openly admit. Trump never simply absorbs narratives, he hijacks them. Criticism becomes a platform, humor becomes a weapon, and conflict becomes the very air he breathes. But Kimmel chose a completely different weapon. He never matched volume with volume. He treated the reactions themselves as the punchline. He abandoned policy debates and refused to compete with outrage. Instead, he traced the pattern and trusted his audience to connect the dots themselves. That quiet restraint ironically became the sharpest blade in the room. The more Trump fired back online with posts and angry rebuttals, the more he unintentionally validated the entire bit, creating a self-sustaining loop that practically authored itself. Kimmel never needed to escalate because Trump's own responses handled that beautifully.
Canada is building a massive bridge between Ontario and Michigan. President Barack Hussein Obama. Is that part of his apology for the post the other day? Or stupidly gave them a waiver so they could get around the Buy American Act. Now the Canadian government expects me as president to permit them to just take advantage of America. On top of everything else, Prime Minister Carney wants to make a deal with China, which will eat Canada alive. The first thing China will do is terminate all ice hockey being played in Canada.
Here is where everything becomes truly fascinating. Trump's public image has long been built on strength, dominance, the unshakable portrait of someone completely unbothered by criticism. Yet during this exchange, something looked strikingly different. Rather than floating above the noise, he appeared consumed by it. Instead of standing tall over late-night comedians, he looked tangled inside their punchlines, and the internet noticed immediately. Clips spread across every platform. Reactions flooded in from every direction. Loyal supporters rushed to defend him. Critics spread the jokes even further. What began as a simple monologue quietly transformed into a masterclass on modern media strategy. Who genuinely controls the narrative? The politician with the megaphone, or the comedian with a nightly audience? Kimmel stayed remarkably calm throughout, and that stillness made everything stick. He never raised his voice. Meanwhile, the backlash only intensified the spotlight. Ratings climbed. Online engagement surged. Every angry response stretched the original segment further. By trying to extinguish the flame, Trump may have unknowingly poured gasoline onto it. The story transcended comedy and became purely about strategy. Reacting visibly to every jab dangerously reinforced the very caricature his critics were carefully painting. There's
other stuff going on. Busting into the election headquarters in Georgia, arresting journalists like Don Lemon, who is here with us tonight, suddenly shutting down the Kennedy Center for 2 years, calling for nationalized elections, Trump suing the government he runs for $10 billion. My head is spinning. I guess that's the point, but my God, remember when Trump was threatening to invade Greenland? That was not even
either. Then dismissing Kimmel as irrelevant. The responses elevated him. Instead of letting the moment fade, outrage locked it into the news cycle. It became a feedback loop. Kimmel jokes, Trump reacts. Reactions inspire more jokes, and audiences watch it unfold in real time. Political satire has always relied on exaggeration to simplify complex realities into digestible moments. It teases, challenges, entertains. Yet this clash revealed how tightly politics and entertainment are woven together. The lines blur almost completely. When a monologue ignites a national conversation and a former president fires back like a reality show rival, you are witnessing performance, layered upon performance. What made this episode sharp was not just the jokes, but the optics of the reaction. For someone who brands himself as unshakable, responding publicly to a late-night segment looks like a crack in the armor. True confidence rarely needs to shout. As responses grew heated, perception shifted. In politics, perception can matter just as much as reality.
His own face on a magazine, she spanked him. He's offended by the halftime. This is a guy who's okay with this being the release of the Epstein files. He's offended for the children. The MAGAverse was so hopping mad about Bad Bunny. It really is amazing how differently people can see the same thing. Half of us saw a heartwarming story of immigrants who had dreams to come to America, work hard, get married, grow up, raise families, sing, dance.
Trump never physically exploded. No dramatic scenes, no shattered podiums, nothing visibly broken. But in the world of optics, impact was never measured by decibel level. It is measured by how the reaction gets perceived. This time, the perception carried undeniable weight. Once the initial dust settled, the conversation shifted from humor toward control. Who genuinely sets the pace in modern politics? The candidate commanding massive campaign rallies, or the host sitting calmly behind a desk with perfect timing? Kimmel never chased the controversy. The controversy circled back to him naturally. In today's media ecosystem, silence can be extraordinarily powerful, but spectacle can be equally potent. Trump has historically leaned heavily into spectacle. Bold statements, fiery posts, immediate counterattacks. That approach has energized his supporters and kept him centered inside every storm. But this situation felt distinctly different. Kimmel never framed himself as an opponent. He positioned himself as a quiet observer, simply commenting on behavior. That subtle distinction matters enormously. Arguing feels like competition. Describing someone's reaction and letting audiences laugh feels like pure exposure. Nat
200 million, now he wants $1 billion. Every post now is a ransom note from the president. And as far as Harvard goes, come on, guys, you know how this works. There's an easy way out of this. Just give him an imaginary degree of some kind. Give him an award for his magnificent brain and penis, and this all goes away. Give him, you want to know what to do? I'll tell you what to do. Give him the first annual.
Exposure has a unique way of stinging deeply. The more Trump pushed back, the more it reinforced exactly what Kimmel suggested, that the reactions were entirely predictable. Outrage had become routine, every perceived slight triggering the same familiar cycle repeatedly. It stopped being about one monologue and became about recognizing a deeply established pattern. Kimmel highlighted how Trump skipped the Kid Rock halftime show entirely, choosing instead to watch Bad Bunny, apparently wanting to confirm his own hatred. Someone captured video of Trump watching the game at his Palm Beach hotel, surrounded by company seated alongside none other than Senator Lindsey Graham. Kimmel delivered his wish quietly, but devastatingly, an eternity of watching football halftime shows beside Lindsey Graham. Rather than attacking policy specifics, Kimmel zeroed in on behavior itself. The repetition, the intensity, the permanent battle stance. It felt less like ideological warfare and more like psychological commentary. When satire feels genuinely authentic, audiences respond instinctively. Tensions rose sharply as supporters labeled the monologue disrespectful and unfair, while critics argued satire exists precisely to challenge power. The debate expanded rapidly. What role should comedy genuinely play in politics? Where does critique end and mockery begin? Does reacting strongly signal resilience or simply strengthen the original joke? The narrative shifted once again.
All of this, I believe, every bit of this is an effort to distract us from the fact that Trump's name, according to one of the congressmen who just reviewed the unredacted files, Jamie Raskin, says he did a search. He said Donald Trump's name appears more than 1 million times, which is a lot of. There's only 3 million pages in the whole. That's more than Harry Potter gets mentioned in all 7.
Rather than attacking policy specifics, Kimmel zeroed in on behavior itself. The repetition, the intensity, the permanent battle stance. It felt less like ideological warfare and more like psychological commentary. When satire feels genuinely authentic, audiences respond instinctively. Tensions rose sharply as supporters labeled the monologue disrespectful while critics argued satire exists precisely to challenge power. The debate expanded rapidly. What role should comedy play in politics? Where does critique end and mockery truly begin? Does reacting strongly signal resilience or simply amplify the original joke? At this stage, the narrative shifted entirely. It was no longer simply Trump versus Kimmel. It became something deeper, a study in how public figures handle mounting pressure. Trump rarely ignores criticism. For supporters, that defiance represents raw strength and refusal to surrender to media elites. Yet constant counterpunching carries serious risk. When every single jab receives maximum force in return, the intensity begins blurring, appearing reactive rather than calculated and strategic. In this case, that damaging perception gained powerful momentum. Kimmel remained consistently composed in follow-up segments.com and completely steady. That striking contrast amplified everything dramatically. One side looked thoroughly amused, the other appeared visibly irritated.
Trump didn't watch the Kid Rock halftime show. He watched Bad Bunny. He wanted to make sure he hated him as much as he thought he would, and he did. Someone shot this video of Trump watching the game at his hotel in Palm Beach, and you can see that's the monitor. He's got a bunch of people there, and he's joined at his table by none other than, you'll see here, Senator Lindsey Graham. That is what I wish on Donald Trump. An eternity of watching football halftime shows with Lindsey.
Yet one consistent truth stands out. In the clash between comedy and politics, perception outweighs substance. Kimmel never needed a policy argument or debate victory. He simply needed to create a powerful moment to spark a response. Once that response arrived, the narrative unfolded automatically. Whether Trump lost control depends entirely on perspective. Some saw strength in pushing back. Others saw vulnerability in escalation. What nobody can deny is that this exchange exposed how delicate media influence has become. For a brief stretch of headlines and trending hashtags, everything felt suddenly flipped. The comedian holding the spotlight appeared to set the tempo while the politician reacted. In that moment, the punchline steered the stage and the response became the story.
Dog ears now. And it's only going to get nuttier now that this new batch of Epstein files is out. The Distracto-matic is cranked all the way up. The DOJ released 3 million pages on Friday, which sounds like a lot until you realize there is another 3 million pages that they haven't released and do not plan to ever release, even though they are required to release all of it by law. And it's important to remember the Justice Department is a completely independent agency from the White House when anyone other than Donald Trump is president. Trump put Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche in charge of the DOJ, which is kind of like the IRS hiring your mom and dad to do your tax.
As days passed, analysts began discussing media presence within polling conversations. Some argued that ignoring satire completely deprives it of oxygen, while others claimed that fighting back energizes loyal supporters and keeps the base fired up. What remained completely undeniable, however, was that the exchange kept Trump buried in headlines for reasons not entirely of his own choosing. Instead of steering the narrative confidently forward, he found himself responding to it. Meanwhile, Kimmel's viewership grew noticeably. Curiosity pulls people in powerfully. Conflict drives clicks relentlessly. Even those who rarely touched late-night television tuned in specifically to understand the growing uproar surrounding everything. Why did jokes sometimes provoke far greater intensity than direct political criticism ever managed to achieve? Part of the answer lives inside vulnerability itself. Humor slips effortlessly past defenses that political arguments never penetrate. It compresses complex reputations into simple, memorable caricatures. It transforms powerful figures into something unexpectedly human and at moments genuinely fragile. The higher someone builds their invincible image, the sharper the contrast becomes when comedy quietly punctures it. As the cycle continued spinning, observers began seriously wondering whether perpetual reactivity remains sustainable inside a media environment specifically engineered to provoke endlessly. Every response becomes fresh content. Every counterattack generates newer headlines. Every heated post extends the original story further than it ever would have traveled alone. There is no clean or comfortable conclusion waiting at the end of this story. Trump's brand consistently resists conventional analysis and always has. Supporters read determination and fearless defiance in every reaction. Critics highlight vulnerability and impulsive behavior in those exact same moments. Each reaction feeds an entirely different audience and satisfies completely different narratives simultaneously. The comedian walks away with growing ratings. The politician carries the weight of every word fired back into a camera that never truly sleeps or forgets anything.